What is mental illness? There are different definitions and interpretations to the term mental illness. Like this one definition from National Alliance on Mental Illness. A mental illness is a condition that affects a person's thinking, feeling, or mood. Such conditions may affect someone's ability to relate to others and function each day. And there's this other definition from Mental Health Association in Forest County. A mental illness is a disease of the brain that causes mild to severe disturbances in thought and or behavior, resulting in an inability to cope with life's ordinary demands and routines. Why is it called a mental illness? If you break down the words mental and illness, mental has to do with the mind or brain of an individual, and illness refers to as like a sickness or disorder as if something is wrong with the individual. What goes on in the brain during mental illnesses? So if you go inside the brain, there's no exact place where the mental illnesses take place, but what exactly happens in the brain is that the neurotransmitters or the chemicals in the brain, well, they're depend on the level, if they're like less or more according to like different certain mental illnesses. Also, the communication between the neurons in the brain may vary depending on the mental illnesses. Also, the serotonin level, the change in size and or shape of the parts of the brain may vary depending on several mental illnesses. Those different mental illnesses will be explained later on. Earliest mental illnesses. The earliest signs recorded of mental illnesses was by a Greek physician named Hippocrates from Greece around 400 BC. He came up with the Hippocratic tradition or oath that physicians even today swear to follow ethical standards to define different mental illnesses. How mental illnesses were first treated. Hippocrates didn't exactly find a certain mental illness or discovered it at the time that he was making the study, but at the time society had treated these mental illnesses that they found as there was an imbalance of body fluids, or what they call humors, in a person. These humors or body fluids were said to be influenced by the environment that they were in, the weather that was occurring, or the food that they probably took. How mental illnesses were treated medically. At the time, these mental illnesses that they saw were treated like any other medical disorder, as if they were only sick or if they have a disease. They were treated as if it could be cured just within like certain different substances or medications that they took in. And he also suggested that they would have to change environments, and hopefully the mental illnesses would go away. So they were seen as either they were only sick or suffering, or if you want to break it down to words, if they were in disease.
Hi there. So I will be going over the history of treatments for mental illnesses and even a brief overview of some of the types of mental illnesses that people could have today. So to begin, as Erling had mentioned, early European thinkers believed in the imbalance of humors. They believed that for very important bodily fluids, could be out of balance, which had caused the mental illness, such as, and these fluids were blood, phlegm, bile, and black bile. And they would use treatments that would affect these 4 different fluids. For example, they'd use ingredients to induce vomiting or bleeding from the head, since they were sort of the first group to realize that mental illnesses stem from the body. But having a family member with a mental illness was a very bad social stigma. So a lot of the times they were abandoned or even left for places to just kind of ignore and take care of them. Asylums was a very popular place for this. The first asylum that was made was in the 16th century in Spain during the Renaissance, and they lived in very poor and dirty conditions, and the workers were rarely ever trained or qualified for this. One of the treatments that they would use is lobotomy, which was first done in 1935. What this is they would take an ice pick and a hammer and just lift up the eyelid and damage the nerves in the frontal lobe, which is the emotional center in the brain. And by doing this, it kind of controls the patient's that they're unable to control, who are out of control. So some different types of mental illnesses that people could have today. One of the most popular amongst the younger generation is eating disorder, and this is considered a very serious mental illness. It's as heritable as other psychiatric conditions that are biologically based, such as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. The behaviors of restricting food can alter brain structure and neurochemistry, which can impair emotions and cognitive functioning. Another one is schizophrenia, which I had mentioned is purely genetics. The patient could either be born with it immediately and start having side effects from it right away, or it could develop slowly throughout the years. There are many different types of schizophrenias, and schizophrenia is caused by an imbalance of brain chemicals, such as dopamine, which is a happiness chemical, glutamate, which is the high dosage protein builder found throughout the whole body, and serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter, a very important one. Another one, which is very uncommon, is alien hand syndrome, which is a neurological disorder, also psychiatric disorder, where the hand involuntarily is in control, also known as anarchic hand. Some extreme cases found is the hand punching or choking the person, or less extreme is just the hand grasping or tearing at clothing. So the brain is very complicated and many things can go wrong with it. The future of mental illnesses is endless.
So far, we have learned about the origin of mental illnesses, and we have also learned about certain points in time where mental illnesses started appearing to present day. What is mental illness as of today? It basically affects a person's thinking, feeling, and mood. Not only that, it also affects a person's function and the ability to execute daily activities. And mental illness is different for everyone, even with people with the same diagnostics, as well as the recovery process is different for every person. The results of mental illnesses are not caused just by one event, but by multiple events. Also, what play a big factor in it are genetics, the environment, and the lifestyle we live. For example, a stressful job or our home life. Some things that also play a big role are our brain functions, biochemical processes, and circuits. There are three types of dissociative disorder. Amnesia. There are three types of dissociative disorder: dissociative amnesia, depersonalization disorder, and dissociative identity disorder. Dissociative amnesia is when it's really hard to remember information about yourself, and it can last for an hour, it can last for a day, it can last for a month, and rarely it can happen for years. Personalization disorder, it's basically the detachment from your feelings, from your thoughts, from your emotions, and it happens around the average age of 16, and it can happen more than once. The third one is dissociative identity disorder, as we may know it best as multiple personality disorder, in which a person alternates between different identities, and it can happen at any age, but it mostly happens at a traumatic event before the age of 5. Some symptoms are memory loss, out-of-body experiences, which means that you're able to basically see yourself like if you're in a movie, and detachment from emotion. All three disorders can happen to any person from any race, from any racial or ethnic background, as well as any socioeconomic background. The second common mental illness that I will be covering is borderline personality disorder, which is difficulties in regulating emotion, which can lead to severe, unstable mood swings, impulsivity, and instability, poor self-image, and stormy personal relationships, which can manifest into destructive behavior such as self-harm, as cutting themselves, or even suicide. Some examples of symptoms are impulsive behavior such as excessive spending, unsafe sex, feeling of boredom or emptiness, or intense and uncontrollable anger. Some causes are genetic-wise, environmental factors, and brain function, which is the portion of the brain that controls emotions and decision-making judgment, which may not communicate well with others. And some treatments are short-term hospitalization and some medications, but there is not one specific medication to treat it, but multiples, such as antidepressants to help with anxiety or to help with depression. Lastly, I will be talking about ADHD, which is also called Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, which is mostly commonly diagnosed in young people according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Some symptoms are struggle following directions, becomes bored very quickly, they don't listen or pay attention when spoken to, and some causes can be genetic. It can run in the family or it can have affected specific areas in the brain. Also, studies show that there's a link between cigarette smoking and alcohol use during pregnancy in children who have ADHD. So some treatments are medications including stimulants, non-stimulants, and antidepressants, as well as behavioral therapy, self-management, education programs, and assistance. Lastly, I just want to talk about the type of organization and institutions there are that help research and teach people about mental illnesses, such as Mental Health America or the National Alliance for Mental Illnesses, also known as NAMI, which was funded in 1979 to provide support. As the technology progresses, scientists studying the development route of mental illnesses have zeroed into the cause of mental illnesses or a probable cause of mental illnesses, which is stress. And when the body reacts to it, basically the stressor kicks in two gears, which becomes the endocrine system, which produces stress hormones such as cortisol, and the sympathetic nervous system churns out other stress related hormones such as epinephrine and norepinephrine.